Welcome to another edition of Chalk or Not. This week we're talking about UFC 318, where 11 of the 14 matchups I would consider to be chalk. And again, my definition of chalk is anything or any fighter that is minus 185 or wider. So a pretty chalk heavy card here, and I'm going to try to help you guys navigate it as best as possible by letting you guys know which ones or which spots you should be parlaying, which ones you should be avoiding, or which ones you should just eat up the chalk straight up and play it straight on the money line. So let's get right into this bad boy. First matchup up, we got Judice coming in at minus 300 going up against Nicole Caliari. Now, Judice will obviously have a striking advantage and looking to establish her range and keep Caliari at distance. But Caliari is kind of strong and physical, just as we saw her make her fight against Ernesto Kiriscate. Quite close, but I think Judice is a little bit more responsible in the defensive grappling realm, and that will allow her to keep this fight at distance, get up there and output in volume, maybe land another head kick knockout, but I expect her to be buoyed by the Louisiana crowd to go to a decision victory here, and I think it'll look quite clear. Thus, I'll put Judice in the chalk-worthy category. The second spot here we're going to talk about is Bruno Ferreira coming in at minus 700, going up against Jackson McVey. If you guys remember, McVey was scheduled to make his UFC debut on short notice last time, I think about 2 to 3 weeks ago, but both of his opponents fell out, but they have managed to insert him here as Bruno Ferreira originally lost his matchup with Ikram Aliskerov. Both guys, Bruno Ferreira getting a giant step down in competition and Jackson McVey getting a giant step up in competition. Now, it's possible that McVey could land that straight shot down the pipe similar to what Nursultan Ruziboev was able to do against Bruno Ferreira. However, I think that Ferreira will have learned from that. I think his explosivity, power, and speed will be too much for McVey here, and that will lead to Ferreira either crashing the pocket and getting off on that big punching, or getting him down and smashing McVey from that top position. And I think he makes it look very easy, to the point that, minus 700 is up there, but it's close to my limit, and I feel like this matchup is more than worthy of it. So I'll put Bruno Ferreira in the chalk-worthy category. Next up, we got Ryan Spann coming in at minus 210 going up against Lucas Brzeski. Spann is hoping to make good on his second attempt at the heavyweight division in the UFC after falling short to Waldo Cortez Costa last time around. He's going up against an easier opponent here in Lucas Brzeski, but seeing how flimsy and flaky Ryan Spann is, especially if he can't get that early finish, it's hard to trust him at this minus 210 line, especially against a guy like Brzeski, who does have a win over streaking heavyweight Walter Walker, and we know he has some decent striking as well, and if he can really thwart that power of Spann early, he might be able to pull away with this one late. Spann is just too flaky and inconsistent for me to trust at chalk, thus I'm going to put him in the not chalk-worthy category. Next up, we got Jimmy Crute coming in at minus 300 going up against Marcin Prachnio. Now, Crute is just dying for a victory at this point in time. He is 0-3-2 over his last 5 fights, going to 2 draws in 3 fights, 10-8 sprinkled out over all those scorecards there. He's very aggressive with his BJJ approach, and that's exactly what he's going to be looking to implement here against Prachnio. And with his power punching, he might be able to crack Prachnio, drag him to the ground after that, and look for a submission. I think he will win, but knowing how flimsy Crute has also been as of late too, no matter how much he talks about his mentality, the fact that he feels the best that he's ever felt before, Prachnio is one of those guys that can go out there and pull off the upset when you're not expecting him to, most notably when he defeated Khalil Roundtree a few years back. So I'm going to put Jimmy Crute in the not chalk-worthy category just because he is too inconsistent, similar to the man that I spoke earlier about, Ryan Spann. Not guys that I want to be trusting at chalk until they can show us that they can have some legitimate consistency to their performances against mediocre competition, right? Let's lay that out with what it is. All right. Next up, Islam Dulatov coming in at minus 600 going up against Adam Fugitt. Dulatov finally making his UFC debut after an absolutely brutal knockout of Nilton Antunes on the Contender Series this past season, and I think he can do the same thing here to Adam Fugitt. Fugitt will likely be looking to get this fight to the ground to try to stay away from the dangerous Muay Thai approach of Dulatov, but Dulatov is no stranger to the grappling and submission game as well, which is something he might be able to catch Fugitt in. But I think that this is a matchup that Dulatov will control in the striking realm, make Fugitt pay anytime he enters the pocket, and I think that will lead to Dulatov getting a very nasty and another highlight reel knockout. So I'm going to put him in the chalk-worthy category here because I think he is just far superior to Fugitt in this spot. All right, next up we got 23-year-old Atiba Gautier coming in at minus 550 going up against Robert Valentin. Now, Gautier is one of those guys that utilizes his explosivity, his power, his athleticism to get a lot of these wins, especially earlier on in his career where he can just squash opponents that he's going up against. But we know it gets harder for these types of fighters to have success in the UFC, especially when they start fighting guys that are a little bit technically superior to them and can shut down the athleticism advantage that they normally have. Now, I think he wins this matchup, but Valentin is a very dangerous and aggressive fighter himself. I know he's 0-2, technically 0-1 in the UFC after that Ultimate Fighter loss or Ultimate Fighter finale loss to Ryan Loder. He did manage to go to a split decision against Taurus Finney. Gautier will have to start Valentin early. Otherwise, Valentin will definitely take advantage of the pace here, start to push a high pace that Gautier might not be able to keep up with. And he is a very slick and nasty jiu-jitsu specialist as well. I think he might be able to get Gautier in some bad spots, and it might get sweaty if you're looking to parlay that minus 550. Thus, even though I'm picking him to win, I'm going to put Gautier in the non-chalk-worthy category as Valentin can be very dangerous and teach the youngster a lesson here. All right, next up, we got Brendan Allen coming in at minus 205 going up against Marvin Vettori. A little bit of a grudge match here. If I remember, these guys actually had a little bit of a scuffle at a casino after a UFC event one time. But kind of surprised to see Allen as such a big favorite in this spot, as Vettori is notoriously hard to put away. And unless Allen can submit him in the first round here, or at least get to his grappling ASAP, which I think he's going to struggle with because of the physicality of Vettori, I think Allen's going to be kind of bullied in this matchup. You know, from the clinch game to just forcing pocket exchanges, Vettori has an iron chin from everything that we've seen. And I think that's going to cause Allen a lot of trouble here. I'm actually picking Vettori to win. You know, I think that he controls the pace here. I think he has a competitive first round, but once he showcases to Allen, that's going to be very difficult to take him down. I think we'll see Vettori start to take over and see Brendan Allen break. So I'm going to put Brendan Allen in the not chalk-worthy category. Next up, we got Daniel Zellhuber coming in at minus 600 going up against Michael Johnson. Zellhuber is looking to bounce back from that nasty fight of the night, I believe it was, against Esteban Ribovics back in September. And I think the UFC is doing a great job in terms of giving him an opponent like Johnson who he could pretty much style on. You know, Johnson is a nasty striker still, but he's 38, 39 years old. His durability has always been a bit of an issue, and he's going to have a lot of range to cover up here, at least with the height advantage of Zellhuber. And I think he's going to struggle to do that here. I think we'll see Zellhuber pick him apart from distance and then land a nasty counter to put him away as well. And at minus 600, I was kind of flip-flopping about this earlier in the week, but I would put Zellhuber in the chalk-worthy category, as I think he'll be able to starch Johnson here and get that early knockout. All right, next up, Dan Ige coming in at minus 200 going up against Patricio Pitbull. Pitbull looking for his first UFC win after an unfortunate loss to Yair Rodriguez in his UFC debut earlier this year. Unfortunately for him, he's going up against the tough Dan Ige, who has never been knocked out and will be a very tough out for him. I think we'll see Ige get into the pocket and put the numbers on Pitbull, and that's often been the issue in Pitbull's game, is the fact that he gets behind on volume. You know, he's kind of just relying on that power and looking to either drop his opponents to swing around back in his favor or knock his opponents out completely and try to win that way. But Ige is going to be very difficult to put away, and I think we'll see Ige do a great job in terms of managing the pace, the distance, the volume, and I think he'll have an advantage in all aspects of this fight, and I see him winning this fight on the scorecards. And, you know, even though there's been a ton of steam on him from when I originally studied this matchup where he was at minus 150, he's up to minus 200 now. And I think that's still a very playable line here. So I'm going to put Dan Ige in the chalk-worthy category. All right, next up, we got Kevin Holland coming in at minus 450, going up against D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez. And normally I'm a guy that's very skeptical in terms of the chalk on Kevin Holland, but this is a very winnable and should be a quite of an easy matchup for Holland. I expect him to be faster, quicker, faster to the punches, faster in the exchanges, does a great job in terms of keeping Rodriguez at bay. And I think that's going to force Rodriguez to try to close the pocket a little too aggressively. And that will lead to Holland landing those big shots. And I think he actually ends up finishing Rodriguez as well. I'm not a fan of playing Kevin Holland at chalk, but this is a great stylistic matchup for him, and I expect him to win it pretty emphatically. Thus, I'll put him into the chalk-worthy category. All right, the final chalk or not spot that we're going to talk about is in the co-main event, as we have streaking middleweight contender here, Roman Kopylov, coming in at minus 230, going up against Paulo Costa. Now, Costa fights are always difficult to predict. Sometimes he shows up and gives a heck of a performance, even in losing efforts like he did against Robert Whittaker. And then there's other matchups where he looks like shit and still ends up winning like he did against Luke Rockhold. So it's very difficult to tell what kind of guy we're going to get, but this is one of the more difficult opponents that Kopylov has gone up against. You know, he'll clearly have an early striking advantage here, but we know he starts to slow down later on in matchups, and Costa, being the wild card that he is, he might be able to push the pace and land some big power shots of his own to potentially catch Kopylov off guard and eventually find a finish himself. So I would think twice about playing Kopylov in this spot. Say what you want about Paulo Costa. He's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. He's just not been all that active, but he has the type of power, athleticism, and skill, I should say, to show up on any given night. And you'll probably be kicking yourself if you end up fading him with the minus 230, especially a guy that's still trying to work his way up into that top 7, top 8 range of the middleweight division. So I'm going to put Roman Kopylov in the not chalk-worthy category, in fear of Paulo Costa just showing the fuck up and fucking shit up. All right, there you guys go. Chalk or not for UFC 318. I will be back tomorrow for the quick picks for UFC 318, and maybe, if the odds come up by then, the PFL Africa breakdown for you guys will also be live on this YouTube channel. I'll see you guys then. Peace.